Welcome back to Hamza Learning Podcast. I'm Hamza, your host, and today we're going to build your English vocabulary with some powerful words. As always, I'm joined by the brilliant Sara. How are you doing today, Sara?
Hi, Hamza. I'm doing great, thank you. I'm excited about today's episode. It's always fun building vocabulary.
Glad to hear it. So, today we're focusing on 5 new words, breaking them down, and giving you examples of how to use them.
That's right, Hamza. And these words are going to help our listeners sound much more fluent when speaking.
Let's start with our first word, articulate. It's an adjective, and it means having or showing the ability to speak fluently and coherently.
I love that word. It's such a compliment to be called articulate, especially when speaking a second language.
Exactly. Here's an example sentence. She is an articulate speaker, always expressing her ideas clearly.
That's a great sentence. And it's so important to be articulate, especially when you're trying to communicate complex ideas.
Right. So, our second word today is ambiguous. This one's a little trickier. It means open to more than one interpretation, not having one clear meaning. For example, you could say, the instructions were ambiguous, so I wasn't sure what to do.
Yes, ambiguous can be confusing for a lot of people. It's like when you ask someone a question, and they give you an answer that could mean 2 completely different things. That's a perfect example. Ambiguous language is common in politics and business, so it's helpful to understand this word.
Now, our third word is resilient. This is one of my favorite words. It's an adjective that means able to withstand or recover quickly from difficult conditions.
Resilient is such a powerful word. It reminds me of people who face difficult situations but stay strong.
Exactly. For instance, the community was resilient in the face of the disaster, rebuilding their homes quickly.
Yes, that's a great example. It's always inspiring to see resilient people who never give up, no matter how hard life gets.
Next up, we have contemplate. It's a verb, meaning to think deeply or carefully about something. A good example would be, he spent hours contemplating the meaning of life.
I love the word contemplate. It's something we all do, right? Like when you're thinking deeply about an important decision.
Alright, last word for today, elusive. It's an adjective that means difficult to find, catch, or achieve. For example, success seemed elusive, but she never gave up on her dreams.
Exactly. And it's a useful word to know when you want to describe that deep thinking process. Elusive can describe anything that's hard to get or understand. I always think of it in terms of goals or dreams that feel just out of reach.
Now that we've gone through the words, how do you think learners can really start to remember and use these in everyday conversations, Sara?
That's a great example. Sometimes elusive things make us work harder to achieve them.
That's a great point, Sara. And something I like to recommend is practicing these words by using them in different sentences throughout the day. It's all about practice and repetition. If you're listening to this podcast, try to come up with your own sentences using articulate, ambiguous, resilient, contemplate, and elusive.
I agree, Hamza. I think one of the best ways to remember new vocabulary is to hear it in context and then use it yourself. I would add that learners can also try writing sentences or even short stories using the new words. It's a great way to reinforce them.
Before we wrap up, we'll quickly review the words again: articulate, ambiguous, resilient, contemplate, and elusive.
Yes, and learners should try to use them when speaking English, even if it's just talking to themselves for practice. That's a great idea. These 5 words are really useful, and once you start using them, you'll feel more confident. I'd also suggest keeping a vocabulary journal where you write down new words and review them regularly. See you next time, everyone.
These words. Thanks for listening, and see you in the next episode of Hamza Learning Podcast. keep learning, and keep growing.